One of the top candidates to replace Boise State head coach Bryan Harsin told reporters today he has not been engaged in BSU's coaching process. The Broncos are looking for a new head coach after Harsin bolted for Auburn last week. Today, Oregon defensive coordinator Andy Avalos met with reporters in Arizona. He's in Arizona because the Ducks play Iowa State Saturday in the Fiesta Bowl in Glendale. That is one of the top 6 college football games, bowl games, in a series known as the New Year's Six. Avalos, he's a BSU alum and he was BSU's defensive coordinator before taking the job at Oregon. Here's what Avalos had to say. There has been a lot of blood, sweat, and equity poured into the Bronco football program, but ultimately there has been no process. He adds he has not been engaged in the process, but he is focused on winning Saturday's bowl game. Okay, as for another top candidate, Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, his boss, owner Jerry Jones, appeared on a Dallas sports talk station today and try and make sense of the last part of what he had to say. Here it is, quote, Jones said, "The bottom line is when it's there, take it, and if it's not there, sometimes go wrestle it up." So is he saying to Kellen Moore, stay or go? I don't know. The Cowboys can clinch a playoff spot this Sunday with a win and a Philadelphia win over Washington. So both candidates for BSU's head coaching job, they've got some big games this weekend. They're obviously focused on that, not talking too much to reporters about the coaching gig. You can watch that Philadelphia and Washington game, by the way, right here on NBC. Kickoff is at 6:20 on Sunday night.